If the US are genuinely interested in protecting Taiwan, why is it representatives of the defense industry that get sent over there? Would they make any money out of potentially causing World War III with China? Hello there, you 6.4 million wonders. Thanks for joining us on this voyage to truth and freedom, awakening and cultivating the light deep within us in order to overcome the darkness apparently without, enabling us to confront the systems of corruption that surround us on all sides. A bombastic broadcast media that wants us forever on the edge of war, living amidst continual fear. Turn on the notification bell right now to ensure you get this content that we make every single day, because every single day there's more of this stuff to get through. Right now, the American defense industry, aka the military-industrial complex, are sending representatives of Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, etc. to Taiwan in order to help them. What kind of help? Missiles and stuff? Is this help got strings attached? You bet it's got strings. Green dollar bill strings. Tendrils made of money attaching you to the US economy. Are the US a kind of benign force going around the world helping people that are being picked on by bully nations? Or are they agitators continually creating new conflict in order to feed the insatiable beast that is the military-industrial complex? Let's have a look at this story while we answer the question, Taiwan, Ukraine too? Are you ready for another Ukraine? I mean, are we still in Ukraine? Around 25 US defense contractors plan to send representatives to Taiwan next month, marking the first time the arms industry will send a delegation to the island since 2019. Not that long ago. The planned arms industry trip to Taiwan comes as the US is looking to ramp up arms sales and general military cooperation with Taiwan, which will further exacerbate tensions with Beijing. This is the problem with their economic model. It needs to continually escalate and grow. Whether it's energy companies or now the military-industrial machine, it requires limitless growth. Growth in this instance means people always buying weapons. That's, I think, just a really simple analysis of what's happening, which means you have to create the conditions in which people will buy weapons. And people don't buy weapons if there are treaties and peace deals and armistices and a general sense of goodwill to all mankind, individual personal awakening, good community relationship. People don't buy weapons under those circumstances. So these visits, do you imagine that what it is, oh shit, right, is there anyone at all we can help? Yeah, Taiwan, they're under all sorts of pressure. Should we get over there and just see if, I don't know, maybe they want some arms? Or do you think it's, we've got this business model, this is what's happening in the next quarter, this is what's likely to happen when eventually the Russia-Ukraine situation peters out? Why don't we get this lined up so we can tell our shareholders, you know how the world works, don't you? This is how the world works. The delegation plans to meet with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen, who recently provoked major Chinese military drills by meeting with the US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California. Let's have a look.
It's a decades-long battle for sovereignty from China.
That's the situation. A decades-long struggle for sovereignty from China. That's what we're being told. I don't know if there's more complexity to the relationship between Taiwan and former European colonial powers like Spain and Portugal. I don't know if Taiwan has formerly been colonized by Japan, a historic enemy of China. I don't know if China have strategically had to occupy Taiwan in the past to prevent colonial and imperial powers impeding on their territory. What I will tell you is that the US literally have China surrounded by military bases. So if China do feel insecure and threatened, you could argue there is some legitimacy to that. In the same way that you could say that NATO expansion provoked Russia. Without saying that Russia's war is not criminal, you can still say Russia's actions in Ukraine are criminal, the deaths are unnecessary, Putin is a monster. All of that can be true, while simultaneously saying, hey, hang on a minute, America appear to have been, through NATO expansion, agitating for that conflict. Are they doing that now? And try and remember this. Try and remember this for in 2 years' time or 3 years' time when you hear Chinese forces were flying planes over neutral waters were bombed. We found that they'll start doing that stuff. The media, you've seen again and again, won't inquire, interrogate, or legitimately question the intentions of the government. They'll just say what they want them to say. You saw that with this whistleblower lad, Buddy Teixeira. Should this have happened? How can we stop it happen again? Why did it happen? Not once did they say, hold on a minute, are there US troops actually fighting Russia? You said there weren't. Do you not really believe that it's possible that Ukraine are ever going to regain this territory? Is there no hope for a peace deal in 2023? All stuff that's being denied and not discussed was revealed. Those revelations are never discussed because what the media do, as you will see in this story, is they convey to you the preferred narrative of the powerful, not a counter narrative, which surely should be at least part of their job. Let me know in the comments in the chat if you agree.
And today, the Taiwanese president held her highest level meeting with a powerful ally. the United States. It's the first time a meeting like this takes place on U.S. soil since 1979. This comes as tensions in the Taiwan Strait continue to escalate.
Tensions don't just escalate like eczema or asthma. They are being agitated now, probably through this media campaign, probably through this defense contractor visit, probably by encroachment of bases all around China. China aren't just, oh, right, let's do this shit now. That's what we're told in order to legitimize and justify these actions. Elsewhere, you'll see Biden talking about, we're going to shut down this trade deal, we're going to control this, we're going to introduce these sanctions. It's a sort of a global approach to creating the conditions in which the system can continue to flourish. It's beneficial if there's tensions, it's beneficial if there's wars, beneficial if there's arms sales, beneficial if you have domestic populations terrified of ongoing war. There's no loss for them because they live in a different world to you.
And it works to bolster its military readiness amid fears they could face the same fate as Ukraine.
This is a bit like Ukraine. It's over there, Ukraine. It's Ukraine of the East.
This morning, we look at the worry in Taiwan that China will attack it someday.
Why has it got this sort of jazzy little bass line? Got news for you guys. World War III is coming. You thought it was bad to provoke Russia in a secret proxy war? Well, if the conflict with Russia was Infinity Wars, then this is Endgame. You're gonna love this unnecessary movie war that we're creating for you right now.
A U.S. warship yesterday sailed through the Taiwan Strait, separating the island from China, a narrow body of water there. And it followed days of Chinese military drills around Taiwan.
So here we go. Here's the stories about military drills. Now there's the warship. Is the warship a provocation or a counter-provocation? If it was a Chinese warship down the Gulf of Mexico or alongside California or whatever, or sailing into Manhattan, oh, well, you know, we were doing drills. What is the legitimacy of this power? Just for a moment, stop and say, wait, what right do the United States have? And it's not United States people, it's not people in some farm somewhere in Minnesota, it's not people working in a factory in Milwaukee, it's not ordinary Americans they're representing. They don't care about ordinary Americans. You die, you're fodder. You're cannon fodder, you're TV fodder, you're sugar fodder. This is legitimization of an economic exercise in the guise of military interventionism.
The U.S. Navy called the voyage a routine movement.
That was just a routine movement. We got these routines where routinely we provoke superpowers in order to create tension so the military-industrial complex, who we give 50% of the Pentagon budget to, not that you'd know from an audit because we've not completed the last 5, and then we can routinely have an unnecessary war where, like, Taiwanese people will die, so everyone's a winner. What about Taiwan? Oh, no, they lose. Like Ukraine. That's a lot of information to consume.
Taiwan's steep coast and mountainous terrain make it something of a natural fortress.
But not a good fortress, so you're gonna need some missiles.
But China's People's Liberation Army could well mount an attack anyway, so Taiwan is beefing up its military and training with new U.S. weapons.
This is the news. They're telling you what they're doing. We're selling them weapons. We're training their troops like we did in Ukraine just prior to this conflict. It's difficult to say whether or not China are worse than US imperialism. You know, there's the Uyghur people being tyrannized and oppressed and genocided. There's all sorts of terrible stuff in Chinese history. This is the story of empire. This is the story of power. That really isn't the question. The question is there a good reason for the United States to get involved in exacerbating these tensions? Is it the United States business? Do ordinary Americans want to lose their lives? Do they want to use their taxpayer dollars, because this is where this is heading, to pay for military aid? Why should you be paying for missiles in wars in Europe and Asia? The answer is there's no reason, except it makes good sense for the military-industrial complex who have armed America now so that it's, broadly speaking, an impenetrable fortress that spends as much money as the next 9 countries combined on military expenditure. So that's done. So now you have to tout for business elsewhere. Please tell me I'm wrong, because if it's right, it's terrifying.
This tropical island, from its ultra-high-tech semiconductor factories,
those semiconductors that we need to stop China becoming more and more powerful,
to its rural highlands where tea is still picked by hand.
And look, they're picking peas with their hands. Adorable.
23 million lives, American leadership, and probably the world's economy all hang in the balance.
What? The world's economy? When did that start becoming one of the objectives? That was always the objective. We don't care about these pea-picking motherfuckers one bit. We care about those semiconductors, and we care about that money. And agitating other superpowers into potential conflicts is a new strategy that we're suddenly willing to consider, when in the old days it was just little countries that you had to pretend it was kind of a fair war between some country you'd never heard of before and America. Now we're doing the big ones. China, Russia, proper countries, proper money. Live on CNN.
China's army even releasing an animated video of how Taiwanese sites would be targeted in an attack.
So here is an animation of how, hypothetically, China would respond if there was agitation. Yeah, that's an animation, just pretend. Here are some actual US military bases that are there already.
The United States plays a major strategic role in the Indo-Pacific. With 375,000 personnel, there's a vast network of operations.
375,000 people, that's basically colonization. That's so many people. That's a decent-sized town worth of military personnel thousands of miles away from the country that they're from in order to do what exactly? You'd really have to believe in the righteousness of the American project. But who among us does anymore? America is tearing itself apart politically. Half of the country hates the other half of the country. Get on with dealing with that shit. You too could live in hatred where every single election is hotly contested and denied by the loser. Go home, deal with that shit, and then once you've got that sorted, maybe start fucking with China and telling them what to do. Because as far as I can see, you ain't got nothing to sell. Except missiles.
That extend from Hawaii all the way to India.
In recent years, the US has been faced with the reality that its apparent singular power is being challenged economically by several countries such as China. To contest these challenges, the US began to rebuild its military force structure through its allies and more of these smaller but no less lethal base structures. For the past 15 years, the US has pushed its allies, including those organised in the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, to strengthen their military power while increasing its techno-military power and reach by establishing smaller bases across the world and producing new aircraft and ships with greater territorial reach. This military force was then used in a series of provocative actions against those it perceived as threats to its hegemony, with two key countries, China and Russia, facing the sharp edge of the US spear. At the two ends of Eurasia, the US began to provoke Russia through Ukraine and provoke China through Taiwan. These provocations over Ukraine have now resulted in a war that's been ongoing for a year, while the new US bases in the Philippines are part of an escalation against China, using Taiwan as a battleground. In recent years, Taiwan has become a flashpoint for tensions between the United States and China. At the root of this simmering conflict are the countries' diverging perspectives over Taiwan's sovereignty. The Chinese position, known as the One China principle, is firm. Although the mainland and Taiwan have different political systems, they are part of the same country, with sovereignty residing in Beijing. Meanwhile, the US position on Taiwan is far less clear. Despite formally adopting the One China policy, the US maintains extensive unofficial relations and military ties with Taiwan. In fact, under the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, US law requires Washington to provide arms of a defensive character to the island. A defensive character. So there you are. There are essentially two conflicting narratives. China sees Taiwan as part of China, and I'm sure there are numerous perspectives available on that. And US will use whatever perspective is amenable to the sale of future arms. And watch the flexibility of defensive character altering in the same way as we saw aid become lethal aid, become just have some weapons now, guys. The taxpayers are funding it anyway, so what do we care? Which we saw, of course, in Ukraine, and that's what this writer is suggesting, that this template will be repeated in this escalating conflict. The US justifies its ongoing ties with Taiwan by claiming that they are necessary to uphold the island's democracy and freedom. We've heard this somewhere before. Democracy and freedom are pretty abstract ideas, and if democracy and freedom are indeed the priorities of the United States of America, I've got a country where you can start practicing those principles. It's called America! Go there! Why don't you take over America and do some democracy and freedom there so that people don't feel tyrannized, unequal, broken, disparate, fraught with conflict, despair, emptiness and hollowness in America. That's where you should focus your energy and effort. And the reason they're not is not because there is no problem with democracy and freedom there, it's because there's no profit to be gleaned. Those poor bastards have already already been sucked dry. We're already at the phase where we're selling them fentanyl in order to rinse the last few cents of profit out of the population. They're no use to them anymore. Now we're installing robots and officially treating them as an occupied population. So the profits are to be had in conflicts between Ukraine and Russia, and coming soon, Taiwan and China. The US maintains close military ties with Taiwan through arms sales, military training advisors, and personnel on the island. Where's all that heading? As well as repeatedly sailing warships through the narrow Taiwan Strait that separates the island from the mainland. In 2022, Washington pledged $10 billion in military aid to Taiwan. Your money. Do you remember voting for that? Do you remember that day when you said, yeah, God, take $10 billion and give that to military aid for Taiwan? Nothing to worry about here. Everything fine in America. Use some of that surplus surfeit money that we don't need for our own homeless crisis, overcrowded prisons, desperate communities, broken small businesses, destroyed moral fabric. We don't need, get that to Taiwan. I've been thinking about it. Taiwan. That's the problem. Meanwhile, US congressional delegations regularly travel to Taipei, legitimizing notions of separatism, such as a controversial visit by former US Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, in August 2022. Would the US or any other Western country accept a situation where China provided military aid, stationed troops, and offered diplomatic support to separatist forces in part of its internationally recognized territory? The answer is of course not. Of course not. In November at the G20 summit in Indonesia, Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden held their first in-person meeting since Biden was elected president. At the meeting, Xi strongly reiterated China's stance on Taiwan, telling Biden that Taiwan is the first red line that must not be crossed. Let me make a note of that. So do not cross Taiwan. Let me put that next to Ukraine. Got it. That's all good. That's good. Also, beat Big Pharma this year. It is clear from the US's track record that Washington is intent on provoking China and disregarding its red line. In Eastern Europe, a similarly reckless approach, namely the continued expansion of NATO towards Russia's border, led to the outbreak of war in Ukraine. As progressive forces in Taiwan have declared, to maintain peace in the Taiwan Strait and avoid the scourge of war, it's necessary to stop US interference. Good luck with that. So there you have it. You now have some more information with which to form your own opinion. Do you imagine that the 25 defense industry representatives are in Taiwan in order just to help Taiwan for humanitarian reasons? Or do you imagine it somehow relates to the bottom line? Have America built an economy, the success of which is contingent upon ongoing war? And if that is indeed the case, as I and many other people believe, what is the incentive to bring about peace? How are we ever going to break out of these structures of endless agitation, now increasingly with opponents that have the ability to wreak havoc and to seriously oppose the American agenda, unless we, as individuals, start to awaken to the reality that we're living in and start to demand political representation that includes discussions on American foreign policy, on globalism, on veiled imperialism, on a nation that's supposed to represent American people, but in fact significantly represents the military-industrial complex. Remember, a significant portion of your federal taxes, about 50%, ends up going to the military, and 50% of that goes to defense contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. Meanwhile, actual military personnel, heroes, they are, to the tune of 60% of them, unable to have decent housing, and 25% of them are using food stamps, and 11% of the American homeless population are former veterans. There's some facts and figures to mull over while thinking about what the incentives of the American war machine might be. And if you are American, I'm certainly not attacking you. And if you're the American war machine, I'm not attacking you either, because frankly, I couldn't afford to. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Turn on the notification bell. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. They're both bloody fantastic. But more important than any of that, please stay free.